Okay, good morning everybody. My name is Adrian Duckenfield. I'm a pre-sales engineer for the UK and Ireland. Thank you for joining me today on this webinar. Today we're going to be looking at the HTTP proxy, including WebBlocker, and how we go about configuring that. So I have my rule base in front of me. I'm going to click on the plus button, and then we have packet filters, proxies, and custom. Okay, so let's go through this. Now, your packet filter rules are what I like to call simple rules. So I can come in here and I can pick on one of these predefined protocols or ports, and I can use these to route traffic. So for example, if I go to the HTTP packet filter, up comes my rule where I can assign application control, I can assign IPS, but you'll see down the bottom here, proxy actions are grayed out. So all this is really going to do is route traffic on TCP port 80 from here to here. As I say, we're going to have IPS for a little bit of protection, but that's all it's going to do. If I want to do anything more intelligent than that, if I want to do any other form of filtering, we need to use the proxy rules. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what a proxy rule actually is. So we are what's called a transparent proxy. Now that means that we will proxy the traffic through the firewall as we receive it. The difference between a transparent proxy and an explicit proxy is with an explicit proxy you have to do browser settings. So your browser on your device has to point to the proxy server. With us, you do not need to do that. So with a transparent proxy, we are still going to be the default gateway. So once we receive the traffic, we can proxy it through the firewall. Now, as you see here, there's a whole bunch of predefined proxies in here for the most commonly used protocols in traffic. But today, really, we're just going to take a look at the HTTP, as this is the most commonly used proxy. So I'm going to go ahead and create my rule, my new policy. So everything else is the same. We can still do the from, the to, the application control, the intrusion prevention. But as we go down the bottom now, we have what's called the proxy actions. Now, the first thing I'm going to point out is the proxy actions can be used in either direction. So it's all about who do you want to protect. So you'll see here we have HTTP client, HTTP server. So if it's a user browsing the internet, that's a client. If this is going to be a HTTP rule protecting a web server that you're hosting, you would use the server. Now, it's not the end of the world if you don't get these around the right way. The reason we have these in here is because certain things will be pre-configured for you. So, like for example, if we did the FTP proxy, I'll give you a quick example actually. With the FTP proxy, if I go to client and I edit my proxy actions, if we go to commands, there's nothing in it. If I go to server, so I'm going to protect my FTP server, all of a sudden we've pre-populated it with commands. So that's the kind of difference you will see in the proxy by selecting either a client or a standard. Okay, the blue ones are the built-in ones. Now you can't change these, but what you can do is start using one of these, and then when you edit it and make some changes, it then saves it as a new file name, which is when you then end up with the black ones down here. So I'm going to keep it simple. I'm just going to use this client standard template. I'm going to edit that. Okay, so let's make a start going through here. So the first thing we have is the HTTP requests at the top. We then have the responses coming back in, and then pretty much everything else in this list is to do with the subscription services, of which we're not particularly going to look at those at the second. So let's actually stick with the proxy stuff, the requests and the responses. Now, the first thing I'm going to tell you about the proxy is it enables the firewall to actually do packet reassembly on the firewall. So with a packet filter policy, which I showed you a moment ago, that's going to do one packet at a time. But with a proxy rule, we do 6 packets at a time. So 6 packets come in, we put the packets back together again on the firewall, and that gives us a very big picture as to what the traffic is trying to do. And because we can see so much of what it's trying to do, we can then control what it's going to do. One example of that is something called a teardrop attack. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that. But a teardrop attack is where I might get a virus, I will cut the code up into segments, and I will attach each segment to a packet of information. If I was using a packet filter rule, as the packet comes through the firewall, I will see, right, okay, that's HTTP, it's TCP port 80. There's a little bit of code on the end, but I don't know what that is. And all of those packets would come through, land on your machine, they would get reassembled, and sure enough, you've got the virus. But because with the proxy rule we do the packet reassembly on the box, by the time we've put 6 packets back together, all of those little bits of viral code get stitched back together, and we can identify it. So that's called a teardrop attack. And that's something that we prevent out of the box. Okay, let's go through this then. So general settings. So what I'm really going to do, I'm not going to go through every single option on here because we'll be here for hours. So instead what I'm going to do is go through the options which are most commonly configured and the ones that you probably need to be most aware of. So on the settings page, we have the usual things like idle timeout. Now usually your browser, I think, is set to something like 60 seconds for an idle timeout. We put ours up to 10 minutes. So your browser is going to time out long before the firewall does. So there's nothing to worry about there. Again, you typically don't have to play around with too many of these things in here. The URL path length, this one has caught people out before, specifically with Facebook. I don't know why, but Facebook seem to use the longest URLs in the world. And probably about a year ago now, we did see it where some Facebook URLs were getting denied because they were too long. And the idea we block a long URL is because obviously you could be running some kind of malicious commands or scripts via the URL. So making it as short as possible keeps it safe. We have slightly increased that number now, and I haven't seen that problem with Facebook in about a year. But as I say, out of the box, you shouldn't really have to play around with this one too much. The next coolest thing in the world is safe search. So you would definitely want to tick this one. So what we're going to do here is we're going to enforce the moderate safe search that you get in things like Google search, YouTube, Bing, Yahoo, and so on. So an example of that is if somebody went to Google Images and typed in porn, they would get no search results come back, or at least they would get filtered results come back. So nothing dangerous would come back through the browser that way. So again, we're not doing that filtering, the search engine is. All we're doing is making sure that your user cannot turn the moderate safe search off. The next thing we have is YouTube for schools. Now this is sort of used here and there in the UK. I don't know about the rest of Europe, but schools can sign up to YouTube, and basically YouTube will give them their own YouTube channel effectively, where you, as an administrator, they can regulate what students can and can't see on YouTube. And so, for example, they can only view educational videos. So what we could do in here is we could put the YouTube channel's ID number into here, and then whenever anybody goes to YouTube, it redirects them to the educational channel, so they don't get to see the normal YouTube. So there are a few schools over here in the UK which are using it, not too many, but I think it's something which is probably catching on. Okay, next thing down, enable logging for reports. Now, with the latest versions of that, this is ticked by default, and this is a good thing. If you guys are using the Dimension report server, you absolutely have to have this ticked. This is going to report on basically everything you see here in this list. If I untick that, I am going to get no useful reporting out of my Dimension server. I will get some logging, so I'll be able to see the traffic through the log monitor, but I won't actually see any report data. So do make sure that that is ticked. As I say, it is ticked by default in the latest one. Okay, next one down, request methods. This is quite fun. So basically what we're looking at here is an RFC compliant list of all of the commands you can send over HTTP. And again, we pre-populate this list for you, so you don't have to do anything about this. But what we could do is we could have a bit of fun in here. So for example, we can see here's post. So that's posting on Facebook, posting in a forum. If you didn't want people to post, then I can remove it from the list. If it's in the list, it's allowed. If it's not in the list, it's denied. As simple as that, and absolutely log it. so you can make sure you see that actually happen. Something else you could do, put. This is like clicking search in Google, so, or any search engine. So what I could do is remove that from the list, and then I could schedule this rule to run every 15 minutes just for one particular user. So every 15 minutes, one user can no longer click search on Google. So you could have a bit of fun if you wanted to using this. Next one down is URL path. So I'm going to do this, star Facebook star. Okay. And then if it's in the list, I'm going to deny it. So what this is going to do is this is going to look for the word Facebook in any part of the URL. So for example, we could go, I don't know, www.bbc.co.uk/Facebook. That would now be denied. So that's a pretty useful feature to do. Something to make sure you don't do in here is you'll see we have the option to allow, deny, drop, block, and AV scan. Whatever you do, don't do this. You don't particularly want to AV scan all of your URLs because that would have a huge impact on the performance of the box. So make sure you don't have that set to AV scan. Typically, you would want it set to this. In fact, while we're looking at these options, let's just cover off these ones here as well in case you guys haven't played with these. So when we do a deny, what we're going to do is we're going to cut the TCP connection and we are going to send a response back to the client saying that the connection has been cut or the connection lost or connection refused. So they will see something in the TCP handshake that says the connection's been cut. When we do a drop, we literally sync the traffic. So the traffic just goes into a big black hole. We don't send anything back to the client to say that we even exist. So drop is sometimes a pretty useful one to use. Then down here we have a block. Now with the block, it's similar to the drop. So again, the traffic's going to go into the big black hole and we're not going to tell the client that we've cut the connection or we even exist. And then we're going to take their IP address and we will add them to the block list for 20 minutes. So use this with great caution because when you add an IP address to the block list for 20 minutes, they will be blocked from all communication through the firewall for that period of time. So use that one with caution. Most people just go with the deny. The header fields, in all my years of WatchGuard, I have never had to touch anything in there, so we're going to whisk over that one. And then we come down to authorization. Okay, this one's kind of interesting. So the different types of authentication over the browser. The first one is basic. Now you need this one. That is username and password when you're logging into a website. So you do need that one. Passport 1.4, that's Microsoft. So that's TechNet, logging into TechNet or the old MSN Messenger. That used Passport 1.4. So you probably need that one. Now NTLM. That's Windows authentication. Now, NTLM is brilliant inside your network, but it is not good fired out across the internet. So what you may or may not be aware is whenever we open our favorite browser in the world, Internet Explorer, it's going to publish your machine name, your IP address, your browser version, your OS version, all sorts of things. It's going to publish lots of information about you straight out to the internet. Now, 99% of the websites out there don't care about what machine you have or your IP address, this, that, and the other. But that information could be used to gather information about you, and then that could be used against you. So I personally always strip out NTLM. So I'm going to remove that from the list. If it's in the list, it's allowed. If it's not, it's stripped. And obviously, I'm going to log that. So if I run into any problems in the future, I can go to my traffic monitor and I can identify that that's actually happened. Then we're now going to look at the HTTP responses coming back in. And again, we've got our idle timeouts. Again, you don't need to really play with that. The URL length again, don't really need to play with that one. Then we come down to headers. Okay, so HTTP headers. And again, what we have here is an RFC compliant list of HTTP headers. Now, headers are what is used to render the web page in your browser. You may previously have gone to a website and it's been not displayed correctly, where maybe it's in plain text and everything, all of the text has like a left margin. The page just doesn't look right, and that's typically because a header command has been blocked somewhere. Now, the reason we have this RFC compliant list is because headers are commands, basically, and you could run a dodgy commands against your machine via the headers. For example, you may have seen the pop-up you get where it's pretending to antivirus scan your hard disk. Obviously, it's not really antivirus scanning your hard disk. What it's actually doing is downloading a virus in the background, and you haven't even clicked on anything. Now, that would come down automatically because of a command in HTTP header. Now, because we only allow the RFC compliant headers in here, we instantly prevent that kind of automatic drive-by download from happening. So this is a great benefit of using a proxy. The flip side of this is not everybody complies with RFCs. So from time to time, you may come across a website which, as I say, maybe a certain function of the website doesn't work, or it doesn't display properly in the browser. And again, that's because they're probably using a non-RFC compliant header command and it's being stripped out. So definitely log that one there. Content type. So now we're going to actually look at what's happening in the browser itself. So for example, you can see here we are allowing everything. Okay, so we're allowing everything that's in this list: images, text, audio. We're also allowing everything which isn't in this list. Now I think that's pretty dodgy, and I'm going to use this to actually, I'm going to make this more secure. Now the first thing I'm going to do is change the view. So we look like that. So now here's everything which is in the list allowed. Everything which isn't in the list is also allowed. And I'm going to go through this list and I'm going to be a bit more secure. So PDF can contain a virus, can't it? So I'm actually going to tell that one to AV scan and log. Java basically is a virus, isn't it? So we will definitely log that one there. Flash, yeah, you do still get some viruses over Flash. So I'm going through the list and I'm telling it to AV scan only the things which can actually contain a virus. There's no point AV scanning everything, right? Now you may come across this from time to time, the non-content type. So by default we're allowing it anyway, right? Because it's not ticked, it's going to hit the default, which is allow. But I have seen this before where if people have this set to block, sometimes they can't access certain things on certain websites. And what it is literally we don't know what the content is, because the person that created the content hasn't put in there what the content actually is. So it could be plain text, it could be a zip file, it could be Java, it could be absolutely anything. We really don't know. An example, look, if I go to application, or let's go to Java, we have this. So we know what it is. If we go to this one, we have nothing. We have no binary data for it because we don't know what it is. So I'm definitely going to AV scan that because it could be a virus for all I know, and I'm going to log it. Yep, I definitely want to do that. And turn it on. There we go. Now the defaults, I'm going to set to AV scan as well. And the reason I'm going to do that is because everything else should be covered in this list above, right? So the normal things like your text, your images, which is what most things are made out of anyway, are going to be allowed through just fine. Everything else which isn't in the list, I'm going to AV scan to be on the safe side. So under here, you can allow and block cookies. And again, in all the years of working for WatchGuard, I've never ever had to play around with that option there. Next one down is body content. So now we're going to look at the file transfer via the web browser. And you'll see here we're saying anything in the list is going to be denied. If it's not in the list, it's going to be allowed. But you see we've got some grayed out ones. And if I change the view, you'll see why. They're grayed out because they're not enabled. So actually, zip file is allowed. Even though it says deny, because it's not enabled, it's going to hit the default action of allow. So we're talking about file transfer. So I am going to AV scan everything I can. So I'm denying exes. I'm now AV scanning zip file. So I could just remove that from the list. And now everything, including zip file, will be AV scanned. We can point to a third-party caching server. So I don't know if you have an old ISA server or TMG or any other kind of old school caching proxy server. You can point to one of those if you needed to. And then we have a proxy exceptions. Now, with the proxy exceptions, you use this for anything that you don't care about, anything which you do not want to be inspected, anything you don't want to AV scan, so or do any of the proxy technology against. So typically things like I don't know what the domain name is, I forget, but things like Office 365, whatever the domain's called, I can't remember. You would add services like that in there which you don't want to see on reporting, which you don't want to be inspected. If somebody says I need to get to Facebook, this is not where you go to do that. This is where you go to bypass absolutely every filter, every part of the filtering of the HTTP proxy. So you use that with caution. Things like your AV signature, whatever the URL is for your AV signatures, that is what you would want to put in there. Things that you don't care about. The next module down. So now we're going to start looking at some of these subscription services, okay? So the next one down is the data loss prevention. Now for this, we use Sophos. And in here, what we can do is we can create a template which can be shared across different rules. So let me have a look. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to go to region, UK. Let's get rid of some credit card numbers. Let's get rid of some bank account details. I'm guessing you guys know what DLP is used for. Postal addresses, that's fine. Then we can go to global, where we can get rid of all of the other credit card numbers as well. Not a problem. Next. Okay, now remember, this is shared across different rules. So the first thing it's saying is what happens when I find it in an email, bearing in mind we're in a HTTP rule, okay? So I'm going to say, I don't know, let's strip it out. What if I find it not in an email? So now that's going to be HTTP and that's going to be FTP. And again, we've got the allow, the drop, the block. So I'm just going to say drop. Now what I could choose to do here is send an alarm, which would then be an email notification. So as and when this happens, I get emailed. Simple as that. That's the Sophos DLP done. The next one down, WebBlocker. Okay, so this is where we do our web filtering. This is the WebSense Triton database. Now the WebSense Triton database, as you see, 130 categories. This is the largest URL database in the world. WebSense is the #1 market leader. In fact, other than WebSense themselves, I believe we are the only other vendor which has access to this Triton database. There are other similar databases which WebSense OEM out to other vendors to use, but not the Triton database. I don't know why they've given us the Triton database, if I'm honest, but it's been greatly received. It's a great product. Okay, so let's go through some of these things in here. Obviously, you get rid of the adult material straight away. Streaming media, perhaps I'll keep streaming media, but I want to get rid of internet, TV, and radio. So as you can see, everything is very largely subcategorized. We go through here. We'll get rid of some drug stuff down here, not a problem. So on and so on and so on. But let's make you aware of some of the key things that I use in here. Proxy avoidance. So that's your UltraSurf, your Tiny VPN, all those kinds of things. Get rid of those. Hacking, absolutely get rid of those. Spam, absolutely get rid of that. And my favorite part of it, oh, this is quite cool as well, right? Adverts. So I have this one blocked on my device, which I use at home. And now when I go to things like eBay and other websites like that, I don't get any adverts displayed on the page, which makes it a much more pleasant experience. So I would typically always block that one. But the best thing is this. Now, if somebody says to you, I don't want you to block anything, you ignore them and you still block this, because this is going to stop the users, as you can see, getting to websites which are malicious or have malicious code on them. So keyloggers, botnets, embedded links, all sorts of things. Now, some of the advantages of using this is, let's say somebody receives a spam email. Sometimes, people still get spam emails, and someone clicks on the link in the email. Now, okay, it got through the anti-spam solution, but then once they click on the link, that's going to get blocked because of bot networks. So although the email came through, they can't still download the malware. Also, things like CryptoLocker. We're all aware of CryptoLocker, right? Let's say somebody has CryptoLocker on their machine, it's just come in, and CryptoLocker needs to be able to call home to download its private key. It can't. Again, because you're blocking the links, you're blocking the botnets, it can't call home. So therefore, although you have CryptoLocker on your machine, it cannot start encrypting anything. So this is a very, very serious category set, which you would definitely want to keep blocked. Now, as I said, the WebSense database is the largest database in the world, and it's updated every 5 minutes, which is brilliant. Now, the full WebSense product, as and when a user using their product finds an uncategorized website, the product will then categorize, it will read the page and it will categorize the website on the fly, which means within 5 minutes of a WebSense customer finding an uncategorized website, every WatchGuard customer knows about it. So it truly is a fantastic database to be using. If we go further down, we've got things like our social networking down here. So I'm going to block social networking. But as you can see, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, those guys have their own categories because obviously they're big enough to warrant having that. So this truly is a great database. Now, this one is missed by everybody in the world, and I wish this was ticked by default, but it isn't. Log this action. You want that ticked. Now, the reason you want that ticked is when you're looking at your reporting in Dimension, this is going to log the website domain names, and it's going to log the website categories that they fall under. So when you go to your reporting, you're going to see facebook.com and the category of social networking. With that unticked, you don't get that. So this one is missed by a lot of people. And this is quite a common one for a technical support case. People saying they're not getting the right information. It's because that one there isn't ticked. And I wish it was by default, but it isn't. When something is uncategorized, do you allow it or do you deny it? I leave it as allow, but that's really on a per customer basis. That's up to them. Now, exceptions. This is where you go if somebody needs to go to a particular website. I can come in here and I can add the website. So let's just do domain.com. And what's nice is if you get the syntax wrong, it's going to correct it for you. There we go, domain.com. So I can see it's being allowed. Now I can deny it. As simple as that. Also, this list here, because I know some people use this quite frequently, the exception list. Bear in mind, this exception list belongs to this WebBlocker template. So if you're using different WebBlocker templates, what you can do is very easily export this from here and import them into another WebBlocker template. So you don't have to keep typing all these things out manually. Now on the advanced page, there's only a couple of things I want to show you in here. So the first one is the local override. Now with this, what we're going to do is I can put a password box on the block page that the user gets. And if you know what the password is, you can type it in to temporarily get around the block. Then there's a cache size. Now I typically don't ever change this one. We're not really a caching web filter, but we do have a very small cache on the box, and it's literally just to cache the most recent URLs that you've been to. I wouldn't recommend increasing that number from the default, if I'm honest, because we don't have a huge amount of storage on the device to be able to do that, so we're not really a caching server, but it's just a very small cache, just for the most frequently used domains. Okay, then we've got the usual things like the idle timeouts. What happens if you can't contact the WebBlocker service? Then we block it. We block it by default because we're a firewall. We're safe that way. Now this one catches people out sometimes as well. When the license expires, access to all websites is denied. Now please bear that in mind, because again, this causes technical support calls sometimes. If somebody phones you up and they're saying they're getting a block page for every single website they're trying to get to, it's going to be because of that, most likely because of that one. Now again, the default is to deny. You could allow, but then all of a sudden now they can get to pornography websites, they can get to keyloggers, botnets, so that's entirely up to you. My stance is to leave it as denied and then make them buy a new license. Okay, so that's the web blocker. Antivirus, this is the AVG Corporate Edition antivirus engine that we use on the box. And there's many reasons why we use this. Reason number one, it's the biggest AV vendor in the world. Did you realize that? Number two, their performance is significantly faster than any of our competitors who do AV scanning. Most of our competitors create their own antivirus engines. They cannot be as fast and they cannot be as good as a company, as the biggest AV vendor in the world that specializes in that. So we use that. And the third reason we use it is because most other people do not use AVG in their business. At home, yes, but not in their business. Most people have Sophos, Kaspersky, whatever it is. So that way, having AVG on the firewall gives them that 2-layer of antivirus. Reputation-enabled defense. Now, this is technically still a subscription service, but this is us. This is one that we've created, and this derived from our email gateway that we sell. We've improved it, and we've turned it into a third-generation RBL blacklist. So what this is going to do for you, let's explain how this works. We're going to score every website from 0 to 100. If something is scored from 0 to 10, then it's a clean website, and that could be Google, BBC News, the websites which don't get hacked, that have very, very good, clean reputations. Now, what we can choose to do is bypass antivirus scanning for those websites. And I'm going to do that, and I'm going to set that to log so I know it's definitely done that. So if now all of a sudden we're not going to be AV scanning all this Java, the Flash and everything that I told it to do earlier, they won't be AV scanned when I go to websites which are clean. It'll just go there, which is faster, which is a good thing. Anything from 11 to 89 will have AV scanning done. And then based on those results of whether or not we allow you to get there or not. Then anywhere from 90 to 100, that's a bad reputation website, and we are definitely going to block that. So this is somebody who's been compromised. Now what we're going to do is we're not going to block the entire website. We will only block the web page which has been compromised. So if it's only the Contact Us page that's been hacked, that's the only page you won't be able to get to. Now, again, with this, you won't get any false positives with this. So if something says reputation-enabled defense has blocked you, don't bypass that, because that's real. That's this is updated dynamically by every single WatchGuard box out there in the field. It's updated by AVG. It's also updated by malware domains and another vendor called Fishtank. So this is a huge dynamic community RBL database. Very, very effective. You can come under the advanced section here and you can tinker around with these thresholds, but if I'm honest, I wouldn't. I would kind of just leave those as they are. I've never seen any legitimate reason to have to change these numbers. Okay, deny message. So this is the HTML for the block page that the user receives. Now we could come in here and we could chop and change this. So if you know any HTML, you could come in here and create your own page. Although you can just do plain text if you want. So perhaps we could just do something like that if you wanted. It's up to you. Now bear in mind the deny message, the block page, belongs to this template, and this template belongs to this rule. So what it means is I could do different deny messages for different users, for different groups, for different VLANs, interfaces, however you want to do it. You can change the deny message per policy. Now, proxy and alarm, I would use this with great caution because basically, if I did this, I'm going to get an email notification for anything which has caused a deny, and you could be inundated with emails. So I do not do that. I do not do that at all. I would just ignore that if I were you. And then finally, the last one here is the APT blocker, which is your Advanced Persistent Threat Scanner. Now, I have another video on YouTube, which I'll give you a link to at the end of this, which explains how to configure this, how to set it up, what it is, what it does. But basically, this one here is going to be looking for your zero-day viruses and things like CryptoLocker. So things come in, they're going to get IPS scans, they're going to get antivirus scans, they're going to go through the web blocker, the reputation. If it still gets past that, it then hits this one. And this one, basically, long story short, if it's seen it before and it knows it's bad, it's going to block it. If it hasn't seen it before, it takes a copy of the file, it takes it up to the cloud service where it runs it in a sandbox. And then within 15 minutes of doing that, we will notify you if it was a bad file. So this one is your prevention is better than cure. This is the module that finds things that antivirus cannot find. But hopefully, most of these things have been picked up by either the reputation, the AV, the web blocker, or any of the proxy technology, even including the intrusion prevention. So hopefully, you wouldn't have got to the point where you needed that anyway. But it's definitely well worth checking out the video on this one, which I explain how that works. So let's have a very quick recap. The APT, reputation scanning, AVG antivirus, the WebSense Triton database for your URL filtering, the Sophos DLP, all of our proxy technology, loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of stuff, including things like the safe search, which is key. So hopefully that's given you an insight as to what a HTTP proxy can do. I have other videos on my channel, which I'm just going to quickly plug. So if you went to youtube.com/WatchGuardUK, like so, you get my channel. And then I've got other videos on here which explain how to do the application control, quotering. There's the APT blocker, which I just mentioned, and also HTTPS inspection as well. So this video is going to get uploaded to that very, very soon after we finish this webinar. I can see there have been a couple of questions fired over, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick them up offline at the end and I will email you the answers back directly, if that's okay. Guys, I hope you find that useful. If you have any questions, feel free to fire them over. Also, I'm also looking for any other ideas for some videos that you guys want to see, because these are ones that are just coming off the top of my head, right? But if there's anything in particular that you need to know how to do, please email me your suggestions and I'll see what I can do about creating those videos for you. As always, it's been a pleasure. Tune in same time next week where my colleague Martin is going to give you a demo of the Dimension, which has just come out, version 2, and he's going to be talking about Dimension Command and Control, which is where we're adding central management to Dimension. So that's pretty exciting. So tune in same time next week to see his video. All the best, guys, and I'll speak to you again real soon.